Hey guys!
Hi!
So good to have you here, Jen. Feel really privileged to have you here actually. Abby and I got to have a conversation with you about your story, and both of us feel so inspired by your brave and courageous spirit. Around a topic that is tough to talk about, and a lot of the time it is something that is left in the dark, and it's a big one, pornography, and so honour you for being here. And for me, I think it is a topic that's really misunderstood, and is a really important one for us to have. And so thank you for entrusting us, the Human As community, with it. So why don't you give us a little bit of context around, I guess, your story?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in Texas, and I grew up in a Christian home, and it's kind of the Bible Belt there in Texas. So I just was my whole life just immersed in that culture, and the culture there was very much get married young and have babies young. Wow. So I got married when I was 21 years old. And my husband Josh and I, we've just been on a very interesting journey through our marriage. And so, we're going to talk about porn today. And my first experience with finding out that Josh struggled with porn was when we were engaged. And I actually didn't know that he was struggling with porn. I just found it, and it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Huh. And it just kind of blew past me because, like I said, I had grown up that way, and it just wasn't really, I had never struggled with it or anything like that. And so we got married, and life resumed. But from the very beginning, honestly, from the first week of marriage, it was tough. And Josh, very shortly after we got married, ended up going on tour with an A-list artist. And so he was touring about 6 months out of the year. And so he was gone a lot. So I always equated our marriage issues to him being gone.
Wow.
And then, again, life just kind of moves on. And I do remember stumbling across porn a couple of times, but it was always, excused away, or I would get mad about it. And then, the whole promises and all of the cycle that can happen when that starts coming up. But it wasn't until we had actually had 2 of our 4 babies.
Wow. Go you.
All girls.
Wow. There's like another wow in itself. Like 4 babies, all girls.
Yeah, all girls.
Household of women.
Yes, lots and lots of girls. So we had 2 of our girls by then, and I actually found out that Josh had an affair. With a really close friend of mine. And so that took us on a completely new journey. And we did some marriage counseling for it, but and Josh never at that time, we didn't really realize that pornography was actually such a huge root to that. We thought that it was about our marriage, and we thought it was about our relationship, and so Josh was drawn to that affair because of our relationship, which actually wasn't the truth. And so Josh ended up going back out on the road again with touring, because he did that for the better part of 10 years. And one thing led to another, and he actually had another affair. And so then at that point, here I am with actually 3 babies at that point, because we had another child in the meantime through all of that. And here I was at this crossroads of, well, crap, I've done this before. And this was hard the last time, and now it's even harder this time. And so, like I mentioned, I'm a believer, and so I just went away for the weekend by myself. And I spent some time in prayer and meditation, and just kind of asking myself and asking God, what in the world was I going to do? And I came away from that weekend just with this huge sense of this phrase, rest and wait. And I didn't really know what that meant, but I felt like I was supposed to try to forgive, which I could have a whole topic on forgiveness, which we won't take up for today, but just deciding that we were going to continue to really figure this out.
Yeah.
And so at that point was the first time that we found the phrase sexual addiction.
Yeah.
Which pornography is lumped under that. And come to find out, Josh had actually been struggling with pornography since he was a teenager.
Wow.
Which was long before he met me. Which definitely gave me a sense of understanding that it wasn't my fault. Now, does that mean that I was the perfect wife? No. Definitely not the perfect wife. None of us are perfect people.
No.
Yeah.
But I knew that it wasn't my fault that he had done those things.
Wow.
And so Josh ended up going to sexual addiction counseling. And we really started to understand the root of what he was struggling with. And that it actually did start with pornography. And it moved. And pornography and addiction, just like any addiction, it grows. You know, even with alcohol, it's the easiest one to relate it to because most people have at least had some type of exposure to that. And that when you have one drink, you get a little buzz. But eventually that stops, and so it has to grow in order to maintain that addiction. And so that's really what the effects were in our marriage. It stemmed from a pornography addiction. Of course, there's many other facets and factors that tie into anything, but it was just a huge powerful thing for Josh to understand what was happening in his brain, how he could get the tools to overcome it. It was not a overnight thing at all. It was many years and one more baby later. And now here we are, many years past that, and our marriage is as strong as it's ever been. It's definitely not perfect. We definitely still have our highs and lows, but that's us.
Wow, that is... Wow. It's hard when we say about tell your story to sum it all up, kind of. And I think it's really important to know that in those moments, there's been some really detailed hurt and some really victorious moments when we tell our story. So from the obviously porn and that leads to affairs, and what has that done for even today, the ripple effects in your marriage where you just you know, we all still have triggers in our world, and I feel like that's something that you know, we always have consequences of our actions for our whole life, and it's how we manage and pray over those. So what are some of the things that you feel like from that addiction has now affected your marriage?
Yeah, the ripple effect just really is in our everyday lives, in every little thing, in the people that you meet, in the faces that you see, in the movies that you watch, in movies that used to be some of our favorites, and sitcoms that used to be some of our favorites. And then we watch them and they just make light of pornography and how it's just a part of your normal life, and we're just like, can't watch that show anymore, because for us it was about the wrong seeds being planted inside us, and our minds justifying that it was okay because TV said it was okay. You know, I'm not going to mention any particular shows, but it's a show that most people have watched, and there's an underlying storyline of pornography, and so the ripple effects for us as a couple are vast. And we have high highs and very, very low lows, because when you've dove to the bottom, you know how deep it can go. And sometimes you go there quite quickly, unintentionally, and it's the smallest of things, and then you go, whoa, why am I at the bottom again? And so I hope that answers your question.
It answered it more better than I asked it, so we're good.
And I think obviously for you guys, you know, you're talking about multiple affairs, and that's a rebuilding trust. That is, and there are so many things and elements and facets that come with that. And one being intimacy, and I think also around porn and how that is linked to relationships and what have you, but how did it affect you guys, I guess, on an intimacy level and navigating that over the years? And
yeah, that's been a really interesting one because when Josh started doing that sexual addiction counseling, and he knew that porn was bad, but that was a part of his own sexual experience. So for him, it's almost like he put everything as bad. And so it made it really difficult to actually become intimate again, because his mind had triggers that, he couldn't communicate or things like that. And so it's been a really long journey for us on regaining intimacy. Obviously, for the fact that we had 2 children post that, intimacy did resume. But it definitely had its challenges and still does to this day. It's funny because I listen to people and people just assume that men have a stronger sex drive than women. And I think that when you've struggled with something like this, that doesn't necessarily equal the same thing. Because there's trauma and there's other things, and so you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt and not let it make you upset and not let it be one of those triggers and one of those ripple effects. Because that's just not who we are. That's not the marriage that we have, and we can't compare ourselves to anybody else's marriage. And then we just try our best and move forward.
Oh my goodness,
You're
amazing. You are an amazing woman.
I am so not perfect though, and people have to understand that there was tons of things that I've been through as well. My language became a lot more colorful than that sweet little Christian girl that I told you about. Just because of everything that I had been through. And I don't ever want people to think that it was me and that I overcame it because I was such a strong person. That's a word that gets used a lot. And I feel like actually I'm probably one of the weakest people. But I think it's in our weakness that we become vulnerable and that that we have this strength that comes out of that. Does that make sense?
No, it does. After all that you've journeyed, does the pain ever go away?
Yes and no. I don't think that it hurts as much, but I've actually had reconstructive surgery on my shoulder, which actually I have to adjust myself because ouch.
Please do that.
And I have a really large scar, and every now and then when a storm comes, an actual storm comes, my shoulder feels the pain. It gets tight, it gets uncomfortable, and it doesn't mean that my shoulder is re-injured. It just means that forevermore my shoulder will never be the same as to what it was before. And that's exactly how I feel in our marriage. It's not that I don't feel pain. I do feel pain, and it's the storms of life. It's all of the hard things that make those moments more difficult. But I also know that it's not a new wound. It's just the effects, like we were talking about earlier. The ripple effects.
Wow. This is, as I said before, a huge topic, and a lot of people will be going through, I guess, what you've been going through, and they'll be doing it, probably processing it themselves and by themselves. What made you come out, I guess, and talk about it? I know you have shared your story before and you have been comfortable sharing, and obviously you're sharing it with us now, but what got you to that point with being comfortable enough to be able to allow people on this journey with you guys?
I think for me it was sharing it one-on-one with people at first, and then just being shocked at how many people we shared our story with, that I would say 90% responded with their struggle with pornography in their past. And and so just understanding how prevalent it is, and just like you said earlier, I don't remember which one of you said it, but you said something about how it's so difficult to talk about this topic. And so we just kind of did start talking about it. We started sharing our story because we know that when something like this is just shoved away in a closet. It can sit there and fester and grow.
So
and
true.
It's only when you expose it to the light that you can actually move forward. Now, the exposing it to the light part sucks. And that's what people are afraid of, because they're afraid of how bad it's going to suck. But honestly, the longer that it's in the dark, the more it grows. The worse that it is going to get over time. And eventually, you're going to have to deal with it in one way or the other. Whether it's suffering inside or being able to come out victorious on the other side.
Before you started getting comfortable and sharing your story, who was the first person that you told and you're like, okay, I really need you to help me out here or just hear me out? Like, who did you know to go to for support, to know that they're not going to judge or say, look what he's doing, leave him, and to know that you could get some sincere, caring, loving support that wants the best for your marriage?
I went to our pastor. That was back in Texas, and just kind of, and also my parents. But also my parents had a very different response because I'm theirs, and they feel that sense of hurt in a different way. And so we went to some of our pastors at our church.
Wow, amazing.
Wow. When you hear the word porn, what do you think?
We talk about it so much, and it's so funny. It depends on the context, I suppose. When I hear the word porn on something like TV, or right now there's a really big movement for the sex trafficking, that people are finding all of these young kids and stuff like that. But then my mind thinks, actually, everyone that's supporting pornography is actually also supporting the sex trafficking world. So it just depends on the context. When I see it in like a sitcom or something like that, I'm like, did you just have to put it in there? And so I get a bit annoyed. But then at other times, like now, when we're talking about it, there's this weird excitement of just understanding that, yay, it's getting brought to the light. Yay, so people are actually attacking this. And I get quite passionate about the experience that we've had, because there is hope. There is, on the other side, there is a potential for greatness.
Wow.
What would you say to the couples who, I mean, you guys stayed together and have worked through it. What would you say to the couples who it got too much and the betrayal was too much and they haven't stayed together?
I would say that's okay. But I would still say that each of them needs to come to healing on their own. They still likely need to go to counseling. And understanding everything that they've now processed. They've also then lost a huge part of who they were, because at some point they were in love. At some point they were. And, sometimes I talk about the person that I was kind of died. And that happens to every single one of those people that choose to not stay together as well, is because the person, the dreams that they had kind of died. And so they still need to find support, find help. I don't think that just keeping it in the dark is actually the best way to handle it, because it still is in the dark and growing and festering and not doing great things to their minds and souls.
That's really good advice.
So for you, obviously your faith is really important to you, and do you feel like, or there ever a time you felt literally like God was the only way that you were going to pull through something like this? Obviously we just spoke about couples that don't stay in it. Is you've run a tough road to choose to commit to your marriage and your relationship, and obviously that's come with highs and low lows. But was there a moment where you felt like literally that was the only way you were going to be able to push through?
Yes, many moments. But when you said that, I just had kind of this flashback to me sitting in my living room in the corner in the chair and just weeping and just feeling and just crying out and saying, God, can you please just put me back together, because I feel like I've just crumpled in all of these pieces. And I just vividly felt like God was holding me just like I hold my youngest, and how they just curl up, you know, to the crook of your neck, and you just can wrap your arms around them. And I felt that so much with my Heavenly Father. And so I don't understand how people could walk the journey without Him, because for me, that was what put me back together.
Wow. Well, you got me there in that moment.
Yeah.
He is so kind, our God, and He's so unbelievably loving, and we'll never understand the magnitude of His love for us. And Him holding us is the perfect place to be. So amazing. I'm gonna say ask you to give advice to a woman, because you're a woman, a lady, and you can speak from that space. So for other women who are going through what you're going through, what would your advice be to them?
Definitely find the right people to support you. It might not actually be your friends.
Wow. That's good.
It might not even actually be your church. I was blessed enough to be in a church that understood and supported and walked that journey with us. But a church is made up of people. And so some people are not equipped for that. And so if you find yourself in that place, don't equate church and God as the same thing. But just find the right people. It might be a counselor. It might be a mentor. It might be someone who has walked that journey before. And just lean in and get ready.
So good. So obviously, human as community, people, we love people.
We love it.
And so we just want you to have an opportunity to be able to thank someone. I know there'll be heaps of people, but just take a moment to just that one person that you feel like they were pivotal in your story, and just giving them a moment of honour. So you can look into the camera. It's so good. It's so good.
Amazing.
Gosh, this is the hardest part. I just want to thank Paul Blue, who's our pastor that I mentioned, for the many nights of listening to us, the weekends that weren't on the clock, and the guidance that he gave us that set us on a path to be able to be where we are today. So, thank you.
Okay, I need a hug right now.